surprised to see so many people so early. This is always an exciting topic for me. We're gonna kick off by talking about the age tech landscape a little bit. And we know this, right? We know that there's more people who are 65 living right now than those who are under 5. We know that the aging demographic is shifting and that we're changing our perspectives. But when we look at technology, we need to also look at innovation. So it's not just technology, but also looking at different strategic intents, how we're actually disrupting our own industry and creating innovation with an impact. Now, what is age tech and what is innovation? We learned things yesterday in the AI session that were blowing our mind, right? So we look at this. I have this actual original in my home. I think this is an amazing magazine. This is in 1924, Radio News. And it's showing telehealth. It's showing a television with a doctor in the home looking at medical monitoring. And the television hadn't been invented for 3 years, wasn't in the home for another 10. This is telehealth at science fiction level. We have to start thinking differently around what technology can do for us that doesn't exist today. But based on human-centered design, what do we actually need? What's the lifestyle change that we need? So I led global innovation for Genesis Healthcare for years. I helped their initiative in China. But when my first day in Genesis was in Pennsylvania, I came from Silicon Valley to Pennsylvania, and I was sitting behind a horse and buggy. And they hand signaled out the door, and I was thinking, I can't live here, this is not innovative. So I stayed in Silicon Valley and I sat at the intersection of the age tech startups, advising them on UI and UX and product market fit, and then as well at Aging 2.0, where I was positioned for Genesis because they were really tired of the vendor-driven model. Sorry guys, but when you have a product and there's others out there, it's very hard as an operator to take a look at technology objectively and looking at new things in best-of-class way. So we're looking at technologies. I was also helping the senior living organizations vet the new technologies, distributors to understand what's in the landscape, and then also help advise the investors to accelerate this. So my role continued. I now work with Delight by Design, which is a consulting firm that looks at age-inclusive design of products and services and age tech. I am a venture partner with 2 funds, a small seed stage fund that many of you actually are invested in, and then a large $250 million that we're raising now in age tech capital. But this conversation started over 10 years ago. So this is the innovation center that I designed in China. Smart connected living environment, virtual reality, augmented reality, digital capture of movement analysis. You walk into the bathroom and the mirror captures your biometric monitoring and tells your health record, your care providers, as well as yourself as an informed consumer what's happening with your health. I designed this 10 years ago. So we should be talking about technology, but others are finally looking at age tech as a category. So I did a keynote address at CES in 2019 on wearables, because wearables shouldn't be something that has this cowbell mentality that tells someone else then you walked in the room. It should inform you within your clothing, as easy as getting dressed in the morning. And Katie Couric covered tech for good because we're looking at elevating the conversation around age tech. Other industries are looking at it. Business of Fashion said, Sarah, let's talk about the economic impact of age tech. When you look at 70% of the luxury spend is over 55, yet we're targeting millennials or younger generations, and the anti-aging campaigns are terrible. And we know that we are slow to the adoption curve in senior living. We are not having all the chatbots and all the virtualization that we see in other industries like hospitality. But we do know older adults are adopting technology at a faster rate. So how are we looking at our own consumer behavior with technology? Well, in 2020 during the pandemic, think about our own behavior. You're home, the pandemic hits, you don't know what you need, so you're researching things, you're searching for information. You then need things delivered to your house because you can't go out, you're feeling isolated, so you need to feel connected. Of the top search engines, we were looking at search domains, we were looking at Google because we needed information. Facebook because we needed to feel connected. These are just human desires and life experiences that then drive the need for technology, not the other way around. Don't just look at tech for tech's sake, but look at our own human behavior. By 2021, TikTok was number one because we needed joy, we needed laughter, we needed to actually be delighted. So who's our consumer now? We meet the needs of our older adults in senior living, but who is moving in next? And what's the technology that they're going to need? In 10 years, Ironmans for over 60 went from 2,500 applicants to 13,000 last year. People are looking at sports differently. People are looking at extreme living differently and lifelong activity differently. They're also having sex. I mean, look at the STD rates that was in the highest demographic. It was 60 and older. They were the first vaccinated and out having a good time. If we're not looking at our actual demographic and the shift and their needs, then we're not meeting the needs in technology. So there's plenty of analysis around what is age tech, and there's physical and cognitive and social influence. And then we bring it down even further. What is, helping with ADLs or the activities of daily living and social connection and social commitment? We see these categories. So we're covering age tech before our panel today so that you can see all of the span of age tech. One of the first pilots I ever did was low tech, actually. It was, I'm an occupational therapist, so we did a pilot with liftware. It was a counterbalancing spoon that augmented the tremor so that people could actually eat better. Well, it's not just about technology and the solution, it's about what the human impact is. So I don't care that there's less spillage so much, or less tremor so much. I care that the person had dignity and was honored to be able to go to the dining room and felt greater confidence in their skill. At Aging 2.0, many companies came to us while I was advising to say what other products are needed in the market. Now, you know the caregiver crisis and you know the caregiver market, but Gillette, for instance, for 100 years, 4,000 razors had been designed for you to shave yourself. Not one for you to shave someone else. So Gillette comes in and we advise on how to actually look at the caregiver market. We know there's rapidly evolving technologies. We know there's a demographic shift. And we hear so much about AI. Yesterday was incredible. And autonomous things and all of these really technical terms, but what does that mean for us in senior living? Technology is only applicable if you can integrated into someone's human experience. So it's not just smart spaces, but it's how it impacts the environment that the people who are with us, how they live and how they interact with their space. Wellness and well-being is now more than ever important for not just the older adult or not just the consumer, but the employee, but the brand itself. If we're looking at paths to purchase, we can search for anything. We can find it, engage with it, purchase it, rate it. Your companies have to do the same. You have to have that same digital path to purchase, and that's age tech because they're coming to your services. People want personalization and customization. And there are companies in each of these categories within age tech that are approaching us and impacting us. We can see several in the room how we can have virtual concierge. Many of you heard yesterday during the pandemic, this virtual approach or digitalization allowed for me to invest in Mezcal because we're able to staff remotely positions that we couldn't fill in the US anyway, and now we're looking at filling them remotely in an effective way, both cost effectively, as well as finding good people who are mission driven. Wouldn't happen until we're looking at true virtualization. Smart spaces are not just about individual technologies, but you look at something like Ohm in the center here. This is actually a smart knob that's on a stove that actually alerts if the individual left the stove on. You can shut it off remotely. You can leave the house and say, shoot, did I shut it off? No, it captures that information, alerts you, and you can shut it off. Looking at the human experience of health and wellness and personalization in every brand. Well, we're seeing now in January, the White House, for instance, basically said, food is medicine, and we need to start looking at nutrition in the home. So at CES, for any of you who came, I know that several of you went, Instacart announced Instacart Health. Partnerships more than ever are looking at technologies and tech platforms as well as the science and research that we know is going to help us with healthy longevity, not just lifespan, but well span. taking food as medicine, prescribing it into the home, connecting people to the resources that they need. We need to look at this technology not to keep people in the home longer outside of our communities, but also vibrant living and healthy choices within our senior living. We see the workforce shift, and it's not just one solution. We have a caregiver crisis. It's not just one silver bullet, but it's looking at augmenting the workforce. It's looking at robotics that are here today that are helping to eliminate certain tasks and automate certain tasks, or create better accessibility of our staff and our employees. We know that care tech is important in order to age in place, but we have to look also at employer benefits. How are we caring for our own employees, where 43% of adults right now in America is a caregiver? Only 17 to 19% actually consider themselves a caregiver, but they are caring for someone at home. We have to change our benefits and change our mentality of this caring economy. We have to look too at things around brain health. We know we're living decades longer than ever before. How are we preparing for that? Looking at socialization and keeping your brain healthy, sleep, which probably no one got last night, but there's a lot of things that are finally at the forefront of our conversation. And in age tech, we're seeing technologies approach these in a different way. Mind you, for instance, can capture a subtle change in your cognition and actually impact whether you had a slight decline, and that could be from lack of sleep or your own comparative norm or early detection of dementia and Alzheimer's. There are companies now finally looking. So Techstars had accelerators for every type of different startup in the world, but finally 3 years ago we started looking at age tech. We started investing in the technologies that help us live longer and better. Companies like Keep Company that are looking at caregiver support and supporting our caregivers in a different way as an employee benefit. Savvy, that's helping with retirement planning, because fintech and actual retirement planning is important. Financial health and wellness is important within the age tech conversation. Lotus, for instance, is allowing for environmental accessibility through a wearable and as a form of a ring. I really like human-centered design that's beautiful and aesthetically pleasing, not stigmatizing, and allowing you to access the things that you need. Lotus does something like that. With a wave of a hand, you can access your room, turn on the lights, and be able to open the door. But partnerships are more important than ever. And we're seeing that. We're going to hear that as our fireside chat starts now. But partnerships are really important. We see experts. We are experts in very specific areas, but how can we look at innovation differently and expand our reach of our services without partnerships? This one example I'll give you is a pretty powerful one. We know that a lot of care is extending into the home. Well, whether that's in our active adult or independent living, people as they age need more care, need more support. So how are we bringing these resources to them other than through partnerships? So this is Atrium Health, which you may have read about. I know them well. They're wonderful people. You know, really the leader in equitable care. $2 billion of free care a year that they've given to support people. Largest hospital at home program in the country. Pioneer in virtual care, one of the first telehealth virtual care platforms. So they're perfect, right? Because they have all of these categories, best of class for telehealth and virtual care. Why would they need anything else? Well, if they want to extend into the home even more, in comes Best Buy. So Best Buy already has logistical support, can ship things, can support things, has technical help and technical support, has brick and mortar, is able to support already an infrastructure, especially around older adults who might need some in-person, some virtual, and brick and mortar as comfort. And so why not combine the two? And this is where really looking at partnerships is so important, to extend both reach, get into healthcare from a retail perspective, extend the reach of healthcare from the retail perspective. Use each other's strengths to benefit the end consumer. So we're going to talk today with with Stephanie and with Brian, and they have great examples of partnerships, of technologies that they're using that are real. And you know, we can't predict what's going to happen with age tech. We heard yesterday in a 10-hour plane ride, all the world changed for an expert in AI. And we know that our world is changing forever fast, and so we're looking, I believe, at the best way to predict the future is to invent it. So together we need to look at what we want and what we need, what our people need, and be able to look at both partnerships, innovation, and age tech in a different way. So I'll ask for Brian and for Stephanie to come up with me, and we'll talk about logistics of what they're up to. They've got certainly some innovative and cutting edge things that they're working on, partnering with many of you already in the room, and I know they've met with you while you're here. Thank you. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you for joining. So let's talk a little bit about these are, I gave the high level, right, and a few examples of things that I've done, but there's just so much out there, and I think that it's really hard to be on the cutting edge without having that early adopter mentality. So I'm wondering, maybe you could start by, how do you feel as an early adopter in the space? You both are known as pioneers and both are known as early adopters. And maybe a little bit of your criteria for how do you look at new technologies and how do you look at that adoption?
I'll start off, and thank you also for hosting this. I believe that there's a little bit of a stigma about being an early adopter. It's okay. As a part of an early adopter, and I would say it's the stigma with it, set it aside, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to waste on technology. I remember about 10 years ago, we were working with a tech company that's no longer around, and I think we invested about $1 million in new development hardware that is now obsolete. And as I walk through those communities, I just cringe to think, what a terrible decision. But it paved the way for much better decisions, way more informed decisions. So for me, if you think about solving problems and using technology, you're never going to fail tackling a problem. And you just have to be very clear, what problem am I trying to solve? How am I looking to move the needle? Because the lack of doing anything is more damaging to the business. And you're going to make the mistakes along the way. You have to just include that in your analysis or create that room in your business plan to make those failures. I think that as the technology continues to evolve, what worked for us 5-6 years ago may no longer be relevant today. And that's okay. I think that's got to be a part of your core mindset.
How about you, Brian? You're obviously on the cutting edge, sometimes bleeding edge. What's the secret to being an early adopter? Do you have criteria that helps you decide?
Well, I was thinking a recent wise sage said, innovation is actually like trying to teach an old dog new tricks, except in this case, the dog is your boss and the trick is trying to get them to financially support your ideas. So this is part of what I struggle with a lot, is I'm trying to push the organization forward and get the buy-in of the folks who write the checks and my team who has to deal with all of these ideas coming across the table here. Innovation is really tough. It's timely, it's costly, and it's risky. And you just have to be, willing to take that risk. It's just the culture of our company. It's how we roll. It's just how we operate. And we're willing to go be out front and take the hits, for the cause and to be on the cutting edge. We derive a lot of benefit from being there, which we can talk about as well. But we make mistakes and we definitely fail and we definitely pay for that failure.
Yeah, I think there's always that risk, and to your point, Stephanie, I've definitely worked with startups. Brian's worked with me at Aging 2.0 in his very early days, and we both are clinicians, and so we looked at things through a certain lens, and we're okay with taking these early risks. But then some folks, similar to what Stephanie said, you're not sure if they're going to be around. They have a great idea, but if you invest all of this time and money, are they going to be here? And so they go to the big guys. Well, everybody knows what happened with Care Innovations. You look at GE and Intel, and they're doing something for only so long, and then they're not getting the fast returns that they expect from their other verticals, and poof, they're gone. So it's not just a risk in early stage startups. It's a risk in the big guys who turn their head against what they're starting to do if they look at aging or they look at age tech. So now that I threw up the brick wall, how do you break down that brick wall? How do you actually vet through the vendors that come to approach you, they both know, they know that both of you are early adopters. What's your criteria when you look at someone? What's going to work for you? I imagine it's unique to your organization, but what's the criteria for you when you're looking at something?
I think flexibility is really important. A lot of times vendors will enter our space trying to solve a problem that's not so important, but their technology is capable of doing something just a little bit more that would be far more impactful. So we find that if a company is a newer entrant, they're more open or more flexible. It's an education cycle, but we are a learning environment at Arrow, so it just sort of lends itself to the cooperation, and we like to partner up to the point that it feels like we have a seat in each other's offices or virtual offices, coordinating and sharing information, problem solving, looking for different ways to utilize the technology. I think that's helpful. And I think then vendors find you as a result of that because you're cooperating, your cooperation is enabling them to reach more potential operators and solve better problems for the future.
Absolutely. You're driving value in with them in their development just as much as they're helping you.
Yeah, and I think we get approached by a lot of vendors who think that they have a very interesting solution, but it's not a problem that we're trying to solve or a problem that we need to solve right now. So it's really about, for me, I can talk to a vendor and within about 2 minutes I can know if this is something that I want to approach or not. And in about 5 or 10 minutes, I can make a decision. Is this something that we want to move forward and have further discussions? But it really has to solve an immediate problem, whatever the solution is, and then it has to be something that we can implement very quickly and at a reasonable cost. And in many cases, when we have a lot of new emerging companies in the space, which is really exciting, but a lot of these companies and these founders don't fully understand the breadth of the complexity of our organizations. And if they have an interesting solution, they're very smart and they're willing to be flexible and work with us on innovation, model development, and pricing, then we might be willing to sit down with them and co-develop a product together.
Yes.
And we did that recently with a company that we've been working for now a couple of years on the development of a product that's been really impactful to us. And that's an example of taking a young startup and helping them to rethink how they can apply their technology to our environments and to our population.
So we look at the vetting process and the selection process, but you made a good point. Implementation needs to also be easy as well as just operate. You have to be able to operationalize it. Stephanie, how much do you include your team in that implementation and deployment process, or even decision making? What's that success look like for you?
Sure. I think one of the most exciting things we've changed in the last year is we implemented the use of crowdsourcing at a whole other level. We've always done a lot of crowdsourcing for problem solving. So for those of you that may follow our company on like LinkedIn, we have a small thought group that for about 13 years we've taken challenges as a collective and created really a space to deposit ideas. So we've continued to advance that over time. In this past year, we added a hackathon to our annual retreat. And actually, one of the companies here, Cubigo, was our sponsor for that, which was super fitting. And we had 14 teams of individuals across our organization submit ideas to change. It was going to be our next big thing. And for us, 15 years ago when we started doing all-day dining, that was like the next big thing. So we said it had to be equivalent to that, or a technology play, or a solution. And it resulted in an app that is solving our staffing crisis. We couldn't find the right fit or the right flexibility with the right fit of the right vendor, so our team just built it themselves. The winning team developed this concept, and we are in the process of implementing that. But that idea started in January, and here we are today at the start of May, mid-launch of this. And I think that's pretty exciting to think. I stole this idea. I like to watch reality TV shows, and this is what Silicon Valley is doing to attract top talent, not even in colleges, but down into high school students competing in this. And I was surprised that we had 3 app entrance into this this competition. So I think including everyone matters. It's also really exciting when different disciplines sit across the aisle. We work with like Further, for example. Our marketing team was able to share an idea that was relevant to us on our development and consulting side of the business, and to see the share, because we're thinking not only about the technology, but the multiple uses of it. That is, I think, the biggest piece is we have more in capacity than we even know what to do. And I think the interdisciplinary approach maximizes and optimizes it. But if you don't include the team in the decision-making, the problem-solving, I think you lose on the implementation side. There becomes a real disconnect. And we've certainly had our share of those failures.
Yeah, I think if you're going to do this kind of stuff, you have to have like an innovation council or something, a kitchen cabinet. Put together your people. It should include IT, legal, ops, clinical leaders from across those different departments within your organization, and then and together you sort of go through the innovation process. You can't just have a single person in the company that does this. It's never going to work. And you can see from Stephanie, it has to come from the top down. You have to have leadership at the very top that's interested in being on the cutting edge and going through the sometimes arduous and grueling process of figuring out how we're going to solve this problem with this piece of technology, and then how you're going to execute on it. So yeah, definitely got to have the council.
Yeah, I agree that interdisciplinary approach is so important. I know you'll hear from Anne later, really like looking at lifelong learning even, and taking academics and the various stakeholders and all putting them in the same room creates some pretty magical things. But I also know there's a lot of vendors in the room who want to get into senior living or have started, and they've had some failures. So I do want to approach that. How do you know while you're piloting something or trying something that you thought the group all wanted and needed, but how do you know when to scale fast or fail fast? Where are you making that decision to say this isn't the fit we thought it was going to be versus, okay, let's go all in? Do you have any tips on that?
I think you have to start with the discipline of setting a metric from the start. Even if you change the metric along the way, it's clearing any bit of your confirmation bias. I get very excited about technology to a point that I'm part of the problem when it comes to when is it time to cut or continue to try to evolve the relationship and move it forward. But our analytics team holds me accountable to it with those metrics. And I think that's really important. The other part is how fast are problems solved, because there are going to be problems. How can you robustly communicate about those needs? How quickly is a vendor able to respond? I think between the measure and then how the relationship is working, that's going to determine your next 1, 2, 3, how many years of deployment thereafter. And you may as well sense those things early as an early indicator from the numbers to the relationship and make those decisions much faster.
Yeah, and I would say listen to your staff. If the pilot gets through to the phase where you're executing and implementing in a building, and within a couple of days your staff are pulling their hair out and they're saying, this is just not, I'm not doing this is not working for me, or they just don't adopt it right away, then that's a huge red flag right there. And you might want to think about pulling the plug. We had a couple of situations like that where we thought we had something that might be a problem solver and might be something that really helps residents, staff, families, and within a couple of days you just realize this is not going anywhere, and rather than keep trying to push it and ram it down their throats, you just pull the plug, eat the cost, and move on.
Yeah, I hear you. And just to add to that experience, there is also that analysis of not just making a decision in a silo and then pushing it down. Sometimes that's the reason for failure, and it's because all stakeholders weren't involved in the selection and deployment. So we did a pilot quite a while back, and it's really an end-of-life platform to honors people's wishes, advance directives at end of life. Well, the board decided this would be great to invest in and roll out the platform and just push it down. It makes sense. It's going to save the money that on the system. It's going to help with the hospital readmissions and all of the nice high-level board-level decisions. No one adopted it at the front level until we started to redesign the pilot. I came in to analyze why it wasn't working. The caregiver at the bedside cares that you are helping someone in their end of life speak for them when they can't speak for themselves. They want to help honor someone's end-of-life wishes. They don't care what system saved money. And so sometimes it's just the approach also of co-creating the implementation and truly having a human-centered approach to how you're deploying, which I know you both do. Stephanie, I'm very interested because you have a lot of different tech and a lot of different data points, and data is always important to you. So how do you not crush the caregiver and the staff with so much information? How do you use the actionable insights from that data to move them forward in a way that isn't overwhelming to them? I'd love tips on that.
Sure. Well, I'm not sure if Brian's situation is similar, but we started using information originally for the leadership level of our home office structure, and we've continued to drive that into use at the property level. And so I think the care team and how they utilize data is not as much of the challenge as how management uses it to create a more efficient workflow. I think if you even just start there, then we can work on the improvements at the delivery level. I think the biggest challenge we face with caregivers is that a lot of technology comes with a new device or even a new app. You know, how we're thinking about the simplicity of their use, that's just the information they need at the moment. Where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to do? How do I check this off? If we can keep that flowing and easy and then allow folks at the property level that are in charge of driving the outcomes, utilizing the information to shift goals and outcomes or focus, I think that's a good place to begin.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I'm wondering, do either of you, Brian maybe in particular, so you have a lot of affluent individuals that you serve, and so sometimes it could be perceived that, sure, technology adoption is easy when you can afford it. But what are you doing to calculate the ROI, or how do you help to look at outcomes in a different way so that you can convince those people who are investing in it? And you said you have to, talk to those who are going to write the check for it. How are you convincing them that that's the right path to take?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I don't know, Stephanie, if you have the magic algorithm that helps us create, what is the ROI? If you do, let's talk afterwards. But I don't think there's a simple answer to that, and maybe with ChatGPT and these other technologies, we will have that at some point very soon. But the thing with ROI is, we have some tech we're using now that is clearly providing value. How do I measure the value is the bigger challenge. We have a whole technology suite that we use for what I call res care. So, and one of that, not to plug one of you guys here, but Rendeavor is one of those. So we do VR. We've done VR in our communities from the very beginning. We were early adopters. And how do you measure the ROI of joy and happiness? Like, we see this with our residents and with our staff when they use that product. And how do you measure that? It's really impossible to do. On the other hand, that particular product, because we were such early adopters, we got a massive amount of PR and press. And if our marketing team decided to, and they wanted to, they could go out and they could calculate the amount of free advertising we got from that relationship. And so we could do something like that. But there's an incredible amount of value that's created in a lot of these products that's very difficult to quantify.
Well, actually, I'm going to add a comment to that. I think we are at a point where the industry may need to start defining a technology spend per unit as some standardization. I was surprised. We still do a heavy volume under my Turnaround Solutions umbrella of consulting business for distressed assets. And I was working with a newer development that got tangled up in opening right before COVID and slowly leasing up. Their tech spend was almost $125 a month without a single clinical tool in that. It was simply in social engagement to HR technologies. It was a suite of services that I would expect to be a little bit more collaborative. And if you probably looked at each of the services, many of them were replicating what the other could do. And I think if you don't have clinical solutions at the core of your tech spend, that's a missed opportunity, and is very, very important, because that has the greatest chance of the return on investment. So we're on the other side of middle market to, as our target in our development. So we're putting this type of technology in, expecting that it's going to drive outcomes that are going to impact the cost for our residents. So it's not that, we're gonna invest potentially way more than what I just quoted as a standard. I think we're closer to $175 a unit, but what we get on the other side is an average of about a 6-month longer stay. That, to us, is enough of a return on investment. But we're not realizing that day one, year two, we're several years in before we can truly see the impact. And I actually think it'll be how many more years before we're able to see the true impact of this increased length of stay, because as many of you could quote, COVID did shorten or create a little bit of disruption to any gains you may experience. We're seeing that flow through our data, that we're now seeing a more pronounced, longer length of stay. But that's because we're thinking of resident outcomes from day one.
Yeah, I think you're right in when you're analyzing the landscape of what people are investing in. Often they haven't looked at the whole suite that they've selected along the way, and so they don't realize they have duplicate systems. Yes. You mentioned Cubico. I've helped to implement them before, and why have a POS system when in your resident engagement platform you can have a module that has a POS system, so that you're actually capturing that revenue. You can actually not have this lost revenue all within the same system. Those are things we need to start looking at, so that it's across a continuum and serving really the whole experience. But Brian, I know that you have lots of things that you see and do. What are you most excited about right now in what you're engaging with?
Yeah, the most exciting thing is really on the clinical front. So we not recently, over the past few years, we've been working with a company that had built a system for the hospitals, which is machine vision, AI, edge computing, sensor systems, et cetera, that makes in our case, the apartment, one of a part of the care team. And what we're doing now is really interesting and cutting edge. Is we literally have cameras in the apartments that have AI baked into them. All the computational analysis takes place on the device. And for our most vulnerable residents, memory care and other residents who are very high risk, we have AI computer cameras in the apartments, and we're able to have visibility into the apartment for the first time in real time. We can see right on our cell phones what's going on in the apartment. The AI in the background is monitoring all of that passively 24/7, and is letting us know if there's a potential problem or if there is a problem. And then it sends us a contextual notification. It says, hey, Mr. So-and-so is getting up out of bed at 2 o'clock in the morning. You might want to go address this. And then, of course, if there is an event, it tells us that. And then we can look at our phone and say, oh, what's going on? The other thing it allows us to do is in real time do rounding on our residents throughout the 24/7. But overnight, we can round on the residents. It captures all the rounding data. So it says we're in compliance, checking on our residents, rather than popping the door open, looking in on them, disrupting them, throwing light into the room. We can do this all virtually. And then the other thing that it does is it captures staff activity in the room. So it gives us, it serves us up a clinical dashboard that gives us clinical intensity or care intensity information. So it'll, in our New York City building, we have 24 floors, and 5 of those are memory care. So we can now see around the clock, anytime I want, I can look on my phone and I can see the 3rd floor is very high care intensity. And then I can drill into that and say the reason is because these 2 residents are taking up an immense amount of nursing time or caregiver time. And the amount of data and information it's serving up to us 24/7 is just incredible. So the value that product is providing us is immense. And for the first time, we actually have tools at our disposal that can help us reduce our staffing, or give us tools that give our staff the information they need to prioritize who needs to be cared for. It's really quite incredible.
Yeah, the technology and the applications, talking about partnerships, you have helped this company, come from the hospital setting, a different setting, and really try to operationalize within our own setting. I know many of you were buzzing yesterday after meeting with Nobi because they do something similar where you're really able to capture so much data and information from the beautiful lamp that sits in the room. And now we have actionable insights that we can actually, perform better and produce better outcomes and really have that information at our fingertips. Stephanie, I know that data is really important to you, and I know you have a lot of things that you've adopted. Anything you want to feature that is really important to you, things that are exciting you right now?
Well, I think it's building a culture of problem solving. So we have very similar technology for our apartments, and what we're using, particularly, I think we're approaching 10 years of implementation. So we have a volume of information now that we are using through Power BI to start projecting not only length of stay, but what are the disruptions to length of stay, and this information can help feed the model. And it started with our team integrating everything into its own platform. So while I don't think it's critical that every problem is solved by one source or one solution, you can create that common landscape, and we happen to use Power BI for that. We are on the point now of shifting from the stacks of data as the paginated reports, building the apps, to now starting to what we call build the house. Like we think of it like Legos. You color stack, and eventually you can create something pretty remarkable. And I think each organization has that opportunity to do it. And often we'll see problems and figure out, how can we do this ourselves, or is this one that we need to problem solve? And during COVID, our team continued to invent other uses of technology that solve problems. And I think that is something you'd be amazed at how much your team could have the capacity to do that. And I never really expected that at the start. I thought it would be through vendor relationships. So if you build that culture of innovation and share, and then ultimately empower to create those solutions, you'd be surprised at how many problems and ultimately product lines you're developing for yourself.
I think that's great. So we'll leave with one question for both of you, rapid fire. If you are a senior living operator in the room and you want to invest in something other than just the IT infrastructure and Wi-Fi in the rooms, what's the first tip to get started in this investment process? What do you think? What advice would you give them?
Understand the environment. Move in for a little while, experience what it's like. I know many operators have that experience, but how many vendors have had that opportunity?
True.
Yeah, and I would say put together that council and reach out to folks in the industry that are doing this all the time, and we can help save you a lot of time and headache. Happy to do it.
Yeah, that's really true. I think that's come up a lot this week, just about collaboration and the opportunity to share stories and share experiences, and certainly SLIF helps us to do that in these few days, and we're here to continue if you need anything on the age tech side. So thank you for joining us, and enjoy the rest of the experience. Yep. Thanks, guys.
Thank you guys so much.